I'm very well, thanks, Timothy. Just turning myself off mute, and thanks for having me today to have a chat to the investors and to the group around technology metals and the development of our vanadium project here in Western Australia. And and as the title says, vanadium for a cleaner future. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how important vanadium is as we move through this decarbonisation process and move to net zero, and a bit of a talk about the vanadium battery sector and also and the general use of it, and obviously and talk about where we are with our project and that development phase. So we'll move.
No, look, we've just I've taken note that we've started slightly late, so we'll give you your full 25 minutes. So 17 minutes of presentation and sort of 8 minutes of Q&A at the end. But yeah, appreciate your time. You feel free to take it away.
Fantastic. I would do that if my slides actually move through. So so they're not actually doing that. So not really sure what's going on there. So it seems to have locked up on me. So I might
maybe retry the screen share. Yeah.
Start that again. See how we go second time round. There we go.
See,
okay.
Yeah, excellent. That's changing for us as well.
Fantastic. Okay, so as I talked about a bit earlier in the introduction, so vanadium is going to be a key commodity in reducing emissions, and it does that two ways. One, via its traditional market in steel alloys, and then with the big growth sector coming in the battery sector. And we're developing the Murchison Technology Metals project up in the Midwest of Western Australia to be a long-term stable supplier of vanadium and high purity vanadium to go into both those sectors, but with a real focus in that growth market into the VRFBs. Just the corporate overview, the snapshot. We're really well placed. We've got $18.6 million cash at bank, still only 210 million shares on issue, sort of 6 years into our life. Really strong position. Resource Capital Fund sitting there, about 17% shareholder as our cornerstone investor, who supported a significant capital raise, $20 million at the end of last year, which has really set us up for moving through what people who have been following us understand is what we were doing as an integration study, integrating our satellite deposit Yarrabubba into an overall the Gabonith feasibility study to deliver this integrated Murchison Technology Metals project. And then, as we've talked about in some of our releases, moving seamlessly into an implementation phase to deliver that project through to start of construction and commissioning, and then production of this high purity vanadium product. Strong position, but valuation obviously in our view very much lagging from market cap to where our value of the project and the opportunity is, and hopefully we can talk a bit about that and start to really recognise that valuation gap and give people the opportunity to get on board and ride that journey. Board and management, we've been quite a stable, consistent board. I was one of the founding directors. Jackie Murray came on board about September, October last year as a nominee from Resource Capital Funds, but also as a fantastic add to the team. A key focus around that investment community, but also into the ESG component of things, which is, as we all know, is becoming far more important in how we're progressing development of everything we do in life. Key appointments on the management team: David English, who rejoined us at the beginning of this year as the Chief Operating Officer. So David's had fantastic long experience in developing significant projects here in Western Australia. So Nova for Sandfire, Nova for Independence Group, Degussa for Sandfire. But importantly for us, he's also spent a couple of years operating the Windamurra vanadium project, which there's not too many people around who have had that hands-on experience in vanadium operations. So really key there. And a more recent appointment hasn't actually started as yet, but Alicia Civil, who's coming on as our CFO. We went through a really exhaustive process interviewing and reviewing people, and Alicia's a standout in that role. So Alicia's finishing up with Fortescue Metals Group, and he's going to be joining us in a month or so into that CFO position, and it's going to be a fantastic addition to the team. Touched on environmental, social and governance. clearly, very, very important in what we do, just as good corporate citizens. What we do as far as we're going to be a very, very long-lived operation. So, we're going to be operating for 25 years plus. So we're going to be multi-decades in this part of the world. So how we engage and bring the communities along the journey with us. But also very important on a global basis of how we sort of move through with financiers, how we present the product that we're producing. So it's actually, as I said earlier, it's a really important part of decarbonisation. It's a critical mineral, so it really feeds into this the whole ESG environment we're in. So, what do we need vanadium redox flow batteries for? What do we need vanadium for? So renewable energy is really needing long duration storage to improve its efficiency and make it really viable. We're rolling out large renewable energy generators around the world, but the long duration storage, the stationary storage is lagging somewhat. But there's a real key need for that, and the vanadium redox flow is one of the best solutions for that. There's a whole bunch of quotes on here from different government departments around the world and different agencies, but we've clearly seen on the eastern seaboard of Western Australia what happens when the planning doesn't go quite right as far as energy generation and reliability, and there's a real massive opportunity for these large scale stationary storage batteries in the VRFBs. So, and this chart just really shows where do they fit. And we hear a lot about lithium-ion batteries, and I'll touch on it a bit later. But I've just come back from a WA government trade mission to India, where we talked a lot about the whole energy storage market across all of the different applications. And lithium-ion is very much in the mobile devices, EVs, and even into the smaller scale storage applications. But the vanadium redox flow batteries are the real, I guess, the real large scale solution that is going to be there and really support these large renewable applications. So cost efficiently, time shifting large amounts of energy, and that's what it's all about. You generate energy when the sun's shining. You need to be able to store that and then put that into the grid when the sun's not shining. Massive opportunities from a commercial point of view, and just arbitraging the cost of that and the price you're going to get it when the sun's not shining, but also just that smoothing out of the supply of energy into the market. So what are these batteries? So those who've heard me before will we've talked about this a bit, but they are very large scale. It's a electrolyte, it's a liquid that actually stores and charges and discharges. So it's not a fire risk because of that. You don't have any of those safety issues you may have with a lithium battery, and very easy to expand. You add more electrolyte and you can expand the capacity for your storage. Very, very long life, 20 plus years, multiple cycles, and they don't degrade over time. So the performance of the storage solution on day one pretty well stays the same at the end of that whole cycle of the physical operation of the battery. And one of the other really interesting things about vanadium redox flow batteries, and it's a little bit unique, is that the vanadium in these batteries is pretty well 100% recyclable. So you can pump it out and repurpose it either back into electrolyte for the batteries of the future, or you can use it in other applications. So you've got an asset in that battery all the way through. The vanadium doesn't degrade at all in these batteries. So a fantastic solution for that long-term, long-duration storage. And where do we see that market going? So this is a couple of different sets of independent data that we've pulled together, some from WoodMac and a group called Guidehouse Insights that has been looking at the growth of the market in the vanadium redox storage flow battery storage market. There's forecasts in Europe and USA of needing 150,000 tonnes of vanadium annually pretty well by the end of this decade. So put into context, that's pretty well close to the total vanadium pentoxide supply that we see here and now. So 2021 was around about 160,000 tonnes. So massive amount of growth going into this market, and that's just Europe. If you look at the chart there on the right-hand side, that's indicating across the globe that we probably need 300,000 tonnes of V2O5 by 2031. So huge growth. As I say, I've just come back from India. My takeaway from that is that the Indian market will be at least as big as the European market by the end of this decade. So add another big chunk of vanadium redox flow battery demand to that, and the market is looking very, very strong. one of the other real key takeaways from my India trip is that the recognition of VRFBs as a better long-term solution in this large-scale storage than a lithium battery. So they're very advanced in their thinking and progressive in their adoption of storage, and VRFBs are very much front of mind. But we see huge growth potential coming into this. Now, the other really interesting thing, and Trevor just talked about his operation in the Ukraine, but we've seen obviously what's happening in Ukraine, the disaster that's happening there with Russia invading. But interestingly, for vanadium, the largest portion of vanadium supply comes from China, second only to Russia. So it's about just under 80% of the world's vanadium is sourced from either China or Russia. So what that's telling us is that the rest of the world is really actively looking for a stable, secure supply chain outside of those jurisdictions. And Australia, Western Australia, certainly fits that very, very nicely. And we're going to be a very significant supplier into that market. So growth of market, but also trying to diversify that supply chain of critical minerals into, I guess, into the US, into Europe, into these other jurisdictions that may be looking to diversify away from the reliance on China and Russia. And then the traditional market. So vanadium is traditionally been alloy in steel, and massive applications: rebar, construction steel, your citchrome spanner, aircraft. So really good, steady growth in that market that's really underpins the vanadium market long term. But also really key in that is the idea that using more vanadium in your steel means you can use less steel for an application. So which means then you flow through to using or emitting less carbon. So you're burning less coal to make the steel. So you're actually then having a significant carbon dioxide saving. So a really big part of the decarbonisation is putting more vanadium into steel and then really having that flow through to those carbon dioxide reductions. Onto the project itself, vanadium from a stable jurisdiction. So we're sitting here in the Midwest of Western Australia, up near Meekatharra, clearly a political and geographically stable jurisdiction, demonstrated through 2020, 2021, through the COVID period of time, how the West Australian mining industry just really continued to power ahead and I guess generate massive economic benefits for the state and the nation as far as maintaining those exports into the rest of the world. But we are a tier 1 country. We've got fantastic employees and skill sets, supportive government, and very, very high ESG standards. So as far as the whole move through financing, you're well ahead of the curve on all of that. We are close to ports. We'll be looking at exporting through the port of Fremantle down at Perth, but also through Geraldton for our bulk cargo, which is going to be the titanium dioxide, which is going to be a really nice byproduct credit that we're going to be generating from our satellite deposit down at Yarrabubba. So we are going to be one of the largest single vanadium mines globally. Currently, Largo have got a mine, Largo Resources, which is TSX listed, have got a mine in Brazil, and they're currently producing around about that 13,000 tonne per annum run rate. We were looking at coming online at that sort of rate, and significant, very large, high-grade resource. We're going to be using conventional processing technology, so we're not going out and reinventing or being too innovative. Really reduces our execution risk. So just particularly looking at what Largo have done in the last 10 years and replicating that as our model. We are targeting an initial 25-year mine life. Those who are following us know that we're in the very final stages of releasing our integration study, and that will confirm that 25-year mine life and a production capacity of up to about 12,500 tonnes per annum of V2O5, which currently is about 6% of global market. But if you look back at those slides previous about where that VRFB demand is taking the market to, we will become a less contributor, and then be looking at how do we ramp up, and it's fair to say we're going to have some latent capacity within our processing circuit, so we can actually increase production as that market grows. Why have we got such a great ore body? Why are we so confident about moving through into this implementation and then development phase? So crucial advantages we've got. So high percentage of fresh ore. Fresh ore is really, really important in processing for these ore bodies. So we're there with a really high percentage of fresh ore and close to surface. So our pre-development costs are very low to access that fresh ore. We've done a massive amount of metallurgical test work, taking it all the way to the really large scale continuous pilot test work. And the ore body presents as a really thick, high grade zone. So it's really simple mining, simple extraction, and that all leads to high recoveries. And then clearly that takes us through having high recoveries. Then all those other processing benefits generate lower operating costs. So, lower operating costs are all about, I guess the more simple standard processing route that delivers that. Ability to be able to use natural gas here in Western Australia for our heating source. So unlike other parts of the world, we still have very reasonably priced natural gas and good supply of it, and so that's fantastic. But another real key in that, and again part of the integration study, which we'll be releasing shortly, is the titanium dioxide product that we generate. So byproduct we're going to generate from Yarrabubba. It's going to be a really big contributor from our revenue side. We're expecting perhaps 15-20% revenue coming from titanium dioxide whilst we're mining down at Yarrabubba, and that has a benefit of adding additional revenue. But from a operating cost in V2O5 equivalent, it's going to certainly set us really well from a OPEX point of view. Conventional salt roast. I won't go through this flow sheet. It's pretty complex as far as all the detail there, but it is a standard flow sheet, as I said, very similar to what Largo are currently operating, processing through crush, grind, magnetic separation. We then get the magnetic component goes through our processing circuit through the roasting kiln to turn the vanadium into a water soluble form, and we extract the vanadium pentoxide out through the back end of that. But importantly, as I've mentioned, the titanium dioxide that comes from our tail stream. So from our non-magnetic stream early in the process, the ilmenite actually reports to the non-magnetics, and we go through a very simple gravity separation circuit, and we produce a very attractive ilmenite product from that. So proven technology reduces the risk of implementation and provides certainty on how we're going to deliver this project. Talked a little bit about operating costs. So this is from our feasibility studies back in 2019. So that's set where our operating costs were from Gavinintha. Now we're updating all that information right now. We're going to come out with some new capital cost, operating costs by the end of the year. But we're expecting, particularly with the addition of the credit that we're going to get from our ilmenite production, that we'll still be in that similar sort of range. We've seen inflation across the board, both capital and operating costs, but the real game changer for us is the identification of the ilmenite product and being able to generate that, being able to produce that early on in the mine life, and really have a positive impact on our revenue side, and therefore our operating costs would we expect to still be in that sort of range that we're seeing there, which clearly puts us down the very bottom end of the cost curve where you really want to be. So reiterating, high quality ore body delivers high recoveries and lower operating costs, and obviously from that flows through you get higher margins and a very, very financially viable project. A bit of a snapshot of what that project looks like. We've locked this down now. That is what the flow sheet looks like. That's what we're going to be building, and what that means, we're now progressing as far as our implementation phase of the project, that we're actually going out to commercial competitive tendering on each of the different parts of that processing circuit and the supporting infrastructure. We're going direct to market, and that's going to give us the reliable economic parameters that will go into the financial model for the end of year when we are targeting a development decision and really engaging with the financiers and having locked down contracts with the various suppliers. So we're not doing an engineering estimate, we're not doing a feasibility study, we're actually engaging directly with market to get actual pricing of what needs to be done next year. So we are poised to commence construction in 2023. We're really well placed. Mentioned right at the beginning, $18.6 million cash at bank. So that gets us the runway to get all the way through these pieces of work we've got, but also provides the ability on our balance sheet to place orders for long lead items. So that's a big key part of our strategy. Get ahead of those deliveries. We know logistics and supply chains are being impacted, so we're going to get ahead of all that and place lead items, orders for long lead items ahead of FID. We've got Resource Capital Funds as a cornerstone investor who's taken a position in and believes in the commodity we're mining. a fantastic board and management team that I've already talked about. But then the partners we're working with, I mentioned earlier, I was on a WA government trade mission to India, which was led by the Deputy Prime Minister and State Development Minister, Roger Cook. Fantastic exposure and opportunity to meet a lot of different groups in India around what we're doing and how we can work with Indian groups to develop both our project, but also what they're doing in country. Really strong engagement with the Australian government, Critical Mineral Facilitation Office, Austrade, moving through to the Northern Australian Infrastructure Facility, Export Finance Australia, all those groups that are going to be a key part of building the capital stack to deliver the project. FL Schmidt, APA Group, real key vendors and suppliers that are going to be a real, I guess, a major part of delivery of our project. And then we've got groups like LE Systems, who are a Japanese group that we're engaged with around our downstream strategy to actually produce vanadium electrolyte here in Australia to support the rollout of these VRFBs into the Australian market. So fantastic, strong relationships into Japan. Again, they're building the foundations for partnerships both at operational level, downstream level, financing. So there's a really strong position that we're developing through all of these things. So where are we at on our I guess, the delivery of the implementation phase? Again, those who have been following us will know that we're a little bit delayed on delivery of our reserve and our production schedule. Fair to say we're very, very close to that being delivered, and so that's going to be some really interesting news that comes out and really underpins what I've just talked about of what that integration study looks like and how we're progressing, how we're implementing the titanium or the ilmenite side of the business, how that all comes together, and then moving through sort of the real key deliveries after that. The environmental approval process, EPA, had a long engagement with the EPA, really constructive engagement, and we're really at the final stages now of delivering on that and getting some information into the public domain about what we're doing on the EPA process. So again, real key engagements that are going to allow us to be at a point by the end of this year, which we're calling development decision, which really goes back to what I was talking about before, being able to then deploy some of our capital to place orders for long lead items to get ahead of that supply side of things, so that once we do hit our financial close, which will be in the first half of next year, we're actually already ahead of the curve. We've got fabrication already started on key pieces of equipment. We've already started some early works, all those sorts of things that are really key to making sure that the delivery of the project happens on time and on budget. So we are going to be a large, low-cost, reliable vanadium supplier in a fantastic jurisdiction, really key part of the global move towards net zero, delivering vanadium into both the steel alloys and the vanadium battery sector. Got a very clear focus on developing our own strategy around the VRFBs and being a key supplier into growing that market here in Australia. Massive growth in vanadium consumption forecast over the next few decades, even out to 2030, but beyond, huge growth in that. And we are going to be one of the key suppliers into that market over a very, very long period of time. So on that, gents, I'm pretty well done. I'm happy to take some questions. You can see there, there's an email address for investors at tmtlimited.com. So obviously, we don't get through questions now. Happy to answer questions via email.